China's economic growth has eased, but only slightly, dispelling fears that the roaring economy was heading for a much steeper decline. Inflation was also lower than expected, suggesting that the government's move to tighten monetary and fiscal policy are having an effect. But the question remains, for how long can China sustain such economic growth? Frances Bell reports.
In recent months, fears of an overheating economy have forced the Chinese government to put on the brakes. Markets were nervous they may have been applied too firmly. However, officials believe the latest figures show they've got the pace right.
The moderate slowdown of China's economic growth is conducive to preventing the economy from overheating and is good for us to strengthen measures of structural adjustment and growth pattern changes.
China doesn't publish quarterly GDP figures, but on an annual basis, economic growth slowed to 10.3% in the June quarter, down from a three-year high of 11.9% in the March quarter. The growth figure is slightly lower than most economists had expected, but so were the inflation figures, with the consumer price index falling to 2.9%. It all points to ongoing buoyancy in the Chinese economy, which is crucial for Australia. But there's expectations the tightening measures will now ease after moves to restrict lending and slow down steel production. The future of China's economy was the topic for discussion at a business lunch in Melbourne, where some were questioning the need for the continuation of the government's stimulus package, which has led to a growth in the dominance of state-owned enterprises.
The downside of that is the so-called crowding out of the investment of the non-state sector, which is the most vibrant and most dynamic sector of the economy. So in that case, what is the direction of change and from now on, which is not that clear?
That view was backed up by a former advisor to the Chinese and US governments who says more should be done to encourage private sector growth in China, starting by removing barriers to borrowing for small businesses and entrepreneurs.
China has to privatize the rural land so that these workers could now have some collateral to get the capital they require to start new businesses. If this is done, this will certainly keep aggregate demand high and replace the withdrawal of the macro stimulus.
The Melbourne Institute's Ross Garno says a major challenge for China's long-term economic prosperity is its ageing population, with the number of people over 60 expected to grow from 70 million to 400 million over the next few decades.
A big question that worries a lot of people in China is will China get old before it gets rich?
However, he doesn't believe the high rate of growth in China is showing any sign of falling soon.
It will fall one day. It will fall as China approaches the frontier of global productivity, but average productivity is still low compared with the advanced countries, so that points some time off.
But he warns one big threat to growth in China is unmitigated climate change. He says although the country has made legitimate efforts to cut emissions, its attempts at diplomacy during the Copenhagen talks were ham-fisted. Professor Garno says it's just one example of the challenge of dealing with China as a great global power.